Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I am super pleased to have with me someone who I call a friend and who I admire greatly, Karen Kirchner. Karen is one of the founders of the women's leadership development company, Her New Standard, and a very experienced career coach. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Simone. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your career journey?
Absolutely. I have had a lot of twists and turns in my career journey. I actually started off as a kindergarten teacher. I was an undergrad education major, and I only lasted 2 years as a kindergarten teacher because I really did not have the patience for it, even though I love kids. So I quickly segued into human resources. And the way I did that was actually kind of interesting because, I was only 2 years out of school and knew I didn't want to be a teacher, knew I wanted to do something else and wasn't sure what. And I moved back to Boston where I'd gone to school, and I actually got the good advice through my alumni network that I should temp in different fields that I'm interested in and try them out. So I actually was able to get temp assignments within HR departments because I thought that might be what I wanted to do. And that actually led to getting an HR assistant job at the Boston Stock Exchange. So that was kind of my entree into HR. And I ended up staying in that field for 12 years. I moved to Citigroup and then to Reader's Digest, and ended up having a really successful career in HR, although I will say by the end I was quite burnt out from that field. And I was lucky enough to go back to school to get my master's in HR management while I was at Reader's Digest, and they paid for the degree, which was wonderful. So I did that at night. And that really helped me when I then decided to go out on my own, because just having that master's degree gave me an extra edge of credibility.
That's awesome. I have a couple questions, so I'm going to interrupt just a moment. The first thing is, I want to know if you have some tips for me with a daughter going into kindergarten. I don't know how I didn't know that about you. It's a big transition, so...
It is, but it's such a fun year for kids, I think. I mean, your daughter will do great because she's already been in daycare, so she's been away from you. It's the kids who've been home with their moms full time that really have a hard time. So Millie will do wonderfully.
Awesome. And then what I love is, because we have various listeners on the podcast, I love the message from your school about trying out different things till you figure out what you really want to do by temping. I love that advice.
Yeah, I was so thankful for that advice because that hadn't occurred to me that you could actually call a temp agency and say, I'd like to be placed in these kinds of roles because these are the ones I want to work in. And it actually was an alum I went to Boston College, and it was a BC alum who was working for this temp agency. So that's probably why she was able to, she was so accommodating. But it was a great way to kind of get my feet wet and figure out, is this field for me? What do I like? What do I not like? And yeah, and it led to a position. So it was terrific.
Oh, that's awesome. And then you decided that you were ready to step out on your own. Would you say before you stepped out to do your own thing that you were in the driver's seat for your career?
I don't. I mean, in one way, yes, because I chose my transitions. I chose to go from the Boston Stock Exchange to Citigroup and from Citigroup to Reader's Digest. But I think when I was at Reader's Digest, I was doing a lot of laying people off. It was really stressful. The company was in a downturn. And I was there for like 8 years. And it was one of the more stressful periods of my life. And I realized then that, wow, you know, there are parts of HR I love, like working with the management team and, you know, being a business partner and helping employees figure out, you know, how to be successful in the company. But the whole part about laying people off and all of the decisions I was involved in, which weren't positive decisions, they didn't positively impact people necessarily. They were very stressful for me. So I realized, I think it took me a while, probably longer than it maybe should have, to realize that, oh, I'm really getting burnout here. So I would say during that period of time, I was, you know, not sleeping very well, not really happy, felt like all I did was work. And it wasn't until I got a performance review that was not that good that I finally woke up and said, you know what, this is not what I'm meant to do. So I think that's when I finally really got in the driver's seat and decided, you know what, I've always wanted to go out on my own. This is the time to do it. All the signs were pointing in that direction.
Awesome. Awesome. So you've had 20 years out on your own, plus this experience inside. Can you put the two together and tell us what the formula is for owning your career?
Well, I think what I've discovered, Simone, is that really knowing yourself is one of the most important things. And I look at that as an ongoing process. You know, I knew some things about myself right out of school, but there was a whole lot I didn't know. And it was through experiencing various situations, various cultures, challenging myself in different ways that I realized, oh, you know, that I really don't do well in that environment, and I really shine in this environment. And these skills are really gifts of mine, and I need to make sure that I'm using those. And these other things, they're really not strengths, so I should not be focusing on them at all. And it seemed to take me a while to really understand that and really make decisions based on that. But once I did, I felt so much more successful, so much happier. It really made a huge difference to me.
That's awesome. I wonder if it's through going through the coach's training process where you really have to shine a light on yourself. You know, some of it is a little uncomfortable. I remember.
Yeah.
Do you think that supported you in knowing which path to take to make you happy?
Absolutely. I did coaching training after I had been coaching for 15 years, believe it or not. So I thought I was a really good coach. And then when I went through coaches training, I realized, wow, there was a lot I didn't know. And I could have been so much better for those 15 years had I got this training sooner. So it was a big aha to me, all the things I was missing, and all the things I learned about myself. I was amazed how much that process changed me. So yeah, that absolutely added to me being able to make the right choices in terms of the kinds of people I wanted to coach, the kind of work I wanted to be doing. I became much more selective after going through that training. Instead of, you know, whatever comes my way, I'm going to try to make it work because here I am on my own and want to be successful.
Awesome. So how do you deal with risk or what advice can you give to others just in terms of being okay or comfortable with taking risks? Because that's a part of the process.
Yeah, it really is. And people often say to me, "What? How did you have the guts to go out on your own when you were, in your 30s, single, living by yourself, no other, streams of income coming your way?" And I think the key is to really listen to yourself. I knew I needed to get out of that situation. I knew it was time for a change. And I just told myself that whatever comes next, I'm going to learn from it. It's going to lead me to the next thing. If this isn't the final stop, it'll lead to something else. But I just told myself, you need to make a change, so just do it. And I think if we can really listen to those inner voices that are trying to guide us, that really helps. And when the fears come up, to really tell ourselves that life is a learning journey, and we're learning all the time. We probably learn the most from the situations that are the hardest. So even if we make a wrong choice, we will learn really valuable lessons from it, and so it's worth it.
I love that. And you got me thinking that my biggest career lesson is from a project that did not go very well, but I remember it to this day because it impacted me so much and it influenced me as a leader. So absolutely agree with what you were saying.
Yeah, that's really true. Those hard lessons are the ones that really make the biggest imprint on us.
Did you ever think to yourself, because 20 years is a long time to be in business for yourself. It's amazing. And someone who has been in business 5 years, I'm like, that's going to be great when I have 20 years under my belt. Did you ever say to yourself, I'm going to go back into this corporate space?
No. In fact, once I had been out for really only a few years, I got inquiries about coming back for various things. And it was so clear to me that I had made the right move and I had no desire to go back. But what's interesting is that I did miss working with organizations, because when I first went out on my own, I was doing career coaching one-on-one with people. And I thought that was going to be, wonderful, the be all end all. And what I realized after a few years of doing it was that I really missed that organizational affiliation. So working with it, with the organization as sort of a backdrop to the work, I just find that more interesting. So I sort of segued at that point into executive coaching instead of the career coaching piece, and that to me was a really great combination.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, tell us about a moment in your career, if you can think of one. Some people can't think of one where you avoided responsibility for your career and how you were able to turn things around.
I did have a situation when I was somewhat newly out on my own and really feeling like I've got to go after all kinds of work, even though I knew I really wanted to do career coaching. As I was building that practice, other consulting opportunities were coming my way, and I had a tendency to take on anything that anybody would hire me for, which seemed at the time like a good strategy. But I talked my way into teaching a class at Fairfield University that was the SPR, I think it's SPHR or SPR. It's the senior certification for HR professionals, and I don't have it. But they said, "Oh, that's okay. You can learn the curriculum and you can teach it. You've been in HR a long time." So I said, "Okay," and I did it. But first of all, my heart wasn't really in it because I didn't, I was ready to get out of HR. So it's not like I really wanted to be teaching people about HR. And secondly, I really didn't have the credential that these people were trying to get. So I didn't have the credibility in their eyes to be teaching this class. And it was really painful because they basically told me, like, "We think you should have this designation if you're teaching us. And, this is not what we signed up for." And I felt awful because, the last thing I wanted to do was let people down. And I really liked the people in the class. But here I was stuck in the middle of this semester and not quite sure how how to get through it, and ended up, that worked with the university to figure out a solution. But the big learning to me was, don't say yes to things that you're not really an expert in, or you're not passionate about enough to learn. Really throw yourself in it and learn it. If those two things aren't there, just don't do it, because otherwise you're going to end up feeling like a failure, which to me was, the worst feeling in the world.
I love that. It is so relevant to today, and to me, I'm feeling the words living with integrity, around your
Yes.
brand and what's important, what you're passionate, etc. And just saying no if your heart's not in it. I love that advice.
Yeah. Yeah. It was another one of those lessons I learned the hard way, but it really stuck with me. I never, I really didn't take on anything after that I didn't feel I had expertise and passion around.
Can you think of resources online or otherwise that you have found to be helpful in owning your career?
There was a great book that is actually still in print called Targeting a Great Career by Kate Wendelton, that really was the backbone of my career coaching practice, because she has such great exercises in there, and it's such a great way of looking at career change. And most of the people I was working with were going through career changes, as was I. So that was immensely helpful. I also love the book, and found really helpful, the book Do More Great Work by Michael Bungay Stanier. This is a great book for people who are in a job that they might, they might be in the right field, maybe even in the right company, but they're not feeling like they're doing work that's fulfilling. So he gives a lot of great exercises, advice on how to figure out what work is really going to help you to shine and be fulfilling for you, and also add more value to the organization, because you're going to bring that passion to it.
I love that you've given two sides of the equation. What to do if you're in corporate and you're wanting to get more fulfilling work, because I certainly have been there. So I think that's a great resource to share. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Well, the time has gone quickly. As we begin to wrap up, what advice would you give to someone wanting to successfully own their career?
I would say take a step in any direction really that feels right to you, and don't overthink it. I'm a big overthinker, and I take the times that I've just gone for it have been usually some of the best moves that I've made. So if you have an urge to take a class, or to get involved in a certain project at your company, or do something, collaborate with a colleague in your spare time, whatever it is, take that step, make time for it, because that will lead you in the direction in a new direction. It will help you to figure out, do I like this? Do I want to do more of it? I think the worst thing is feeling stuck. Like, I'm not happy, but I don't know where to go or what to do. And it's tremendously freeing if we just take a step. And it might just be talking to our boss about the kind of work we'd like to do more of. And letting other people in the company know that we want to be involved in certain kinds of projects. What's something we didn't talk about, Simone, is Her New Standard, which is a women's leadership development organization that I started with two partners 3 years ago now.
Is it 3 years? Wow.
Yeah, it's been 3 years. And one of the things we talk about with the women who are in our programs is that it's so important that you make sure your voice is heard. So in whatever way that you can articulate to the people around you what it is that you want to do more of. And if you don't know what that is, you need to do some soul searching first to figure it out. And that job, Targeting a Great Career, has some terrific exercises in it to help you with that. But if you look back on the projects that you've been involved in over the last several years, and you think about the things that really energized you and got you excited about coming to work, that's the kind of stuff you want to do more of. So letting people know what you're really good at so that they keep you in mind can lead to all kinds of exciting opportunities.
Absolutely. I think some vulnerability is in order, because you have to sort of share you have to do some self-awareness, look at yourself, and then you have to be vulnerable and trust that you can share your truth with others.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, as we begin to wrap up, tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you, Karen.
I'm on LinkedIn. Her New Standard is on there. So if you look up at Her New Standard, you'll find all three of us. You can reach me at Karen@hernewstandard.com. And I'm also, I'm on LinkedIn myself. So Karen Kirkner, and would love to hear from anybody who has questions or thoughts, and would love to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Karen, thank you so much for sharing your career journey, your advice. I'm sure our listeners will very much appreciate it. But thank you for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Simone.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.